Our world is going nuts at the moment. Could New Age spirituality have anything to do with it? Is it possible that the people behind our global institutes all believe the same thing and are following a script? The subjects we will be looking at today are all interconnected. Now's a good time to grab refreshments, because it's about to get fast and furious. The tree of the knowledge of good and evil is Kabbalah. The Bible tells us that if you eat of the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, you will suffer a spiritual death. The third eye is at the top of the Kabbalah tree. Once activated, they say they are in the presence of God. The serpent told Eve, if you eat of it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God. Kabbalah has two branches. The left-hand path is represented by Satan, and the right-hand path by Lucifer. Although they appear to be opposing forces, they are actually two sides of the same being. Madame Blavatsky wrote, Lucifer is divine and terrestrial light, the Holy Ghost and Satan at one and the same time. And no wonder, for Satan himself masquerades as an angel of light. Satan creates chaos, and Lucifer brings order out of chaos. The Freemasons call it ordo ab chao. Lucifer is light fighting darkness, feminism against the toxic male patriarchy, the collective versus the individual, spiritual versus physical, New Age versus Satanism, channeling spirits versus rituals, evolution versus revolution. They used to conceal their methods, now they reveal them through the New Age. All secret societies are based on Kabbalah. All secret societies exist to plan the future for humanity. All the secret societies are fronts for the royal bloodline of Charlemagne and the black nobility behind the Vatican. They play a game of good cop, bad cop to steer humanity to the next stage of their plan. It will soon be common knowledge that the world is run by a satanic dark cabal. Does that make those exposing the truth the good guys, the bringers of light? They want us to see the truth. Those who exposed it will then be seen as leaders. These leaders will bring in a Luciferian New Age. New Agers believe we can become gods, just like the serpent said to Eve. They say we all have a spark of divinity within us, and if we activate it, it becomes a fire or a flame, a blaze, an inner sun. The pineal gland is activated and the third eye is opened. You become illuminated or enlightened. To Hindus it's Kundalini, to Buddhists Nirvana, the Freemasons it's Gnosis. The New Age says you're evolving or gaining Christ consciousness. You are then 666, the perfected man, co-creating reality with God. You have become the Christ.
People that have not read your writings would probably right now be very concerned with what you're saying and taking it as, is he saying he himself is God?
Well, I am saying that.
Explain why.
I am saying, but because it's the truth. I mean, Jesus said that. Many masters have said that. Many people have said that, and rightfully so. God has said that. Have I not said, ye are gods?
The founder of the New Age movement has been credited to Helena Petrovna Blavatsky, otherwise known as Madame Blavatsky. She started the Theosophical Society with two Freemasons and published a magazine called Lucifer. Sarah McKechnie was the international president of Lucis Trust, started by Alice Bailey, a student of Madame Blavatsky.
So Lucifer to Blavatsky was one of the great sacrificial beings who descended to earth. That's where we get the idea of the fall. As John Milton, I think it was the British poet John Milton, wrote about the fall of the angels. That was the descent of the solar angels to earth as an act of sacrifice on our behalf.
Alice Bailey has also been described as a founder of the New Age movement. She started Lucis Trust, which was originally called the Lucifer Publishing Company. She married Foster Bailey, a high-level Freemason. The actual New Age movement fully started around the 1970s, brought about by American theosophist David Spangler. In his book Reflections on the Christ, he writes, "The true light of Lucifer cannot be seen through sorrow, through darkness, through reflection. The true light of this great being can only be recognized when one's own eyes can see with the light of the Christ, the light of the inner sun. Lucifer comes to give us the final gift of wholeness. If we accept it, then he is free and we are free. That is the Luciferic initiation. It is one that many people now and in the days ahead will be facing, for it is an initiation into the new age. We can follow this Gnostic ideology through history, from the Rosicrucians to the Freemasons, Theosophy to Aleister Crowley and the New Age. Let's see what they've all got in common. Kabbalah uses terms such as Merkabah and Flower of Life. Kabbalah remains an important aspect of the teachings of the Rosicrucian order. The Flower of Life is important to Masons and known by many names, such as the Chariot of the Gods from Ezekiel's vision in the Bible, or another name is the Merkabah. Madame Blavatsky wrote about the Kabbalah. Aleister Crowley wrote books on Kabbalah. The Gaia New Age website has Merkabah and angel ceremonies, so that's a match. How about the Eye of Horus? One of many one-eyed gods around the world. The Eye of Horus, or the Third Eye. The Rosicrucians use the all-seeing eye. Victor Hugo, a Rosicrucian, is hailed as a saint by the Cao Dai religion in Vietnam. They have the all-seeing eye in their temples. Lucis Trust says, when the fires of Kundalini find the pineal gland, the third eye is opened. The Masons use the Eye of Providence. Aleister Crowley says, thou spiritual son, Satan, thou eye. And the Gaia New Age website has instructions on how to awaken your third eye. Ascended Masters. Religions or secret societies with one-eyed gods are waiting for their world teacher or ascended masters.
But do you claim to be the Son of God? Because Terry Wogan said to you on the Wogan Show, you claim to be the Son of God, and you said yes.
Well, I am, yes, I'm saying that. But what I'm saying is we're all the children of God. But some people come to earth, Jesus was one, there were many more before him, who are actually part of the soul of the Godhead. It's God incarnate on earth. That's what Jesus was, that's what these other people were before.
Here's some more popular world teachers or ascended masters. They call them the Christ. Dujwal Kul is the ascended master channeled by Alice Bailey. Sanat Kumara is obviously an acronym of Satan. He is known as Lord of the World. In Alice Bailey's book Esoteric Healing, she tells us that Sanat Kumara is the divine prisoner of this planet, waiting for his release. Now, where have I heard that before? Lucis Trust says the coming world teacher will be mainly concerned not with the result of past error and inadequacy, but with the requirements of a new world order and with the reorganization of the social structure. This is known as the reappearance of the Christ. Here's the spooky part. How did Jesus know that many would come in his name, saying, I am Christ, and deceive many? The Rosicrucians followed the ascended master, Saint Germain. Manly p.hall said a Mason's religion must be universal. Christ, Buddha or Muhammad, the name means little, for he recognizes only the light and not the bearer. Kutumi is an ascended master who inspired the founding of the Theosophical Society. Aleister Crowley's ascended master was called Awas, and Alice Bailey channeled Dujwal Kul. Now for the New World Order. Or the New Age, the New Atlantis, Brave New World, Age of Enlightenment, Age of Reason, Age of Horus, Age of Aquarius, the Great Reset, the Fourth Industrial Revolution, the Green New Deal, the New Normal, or the Great Awakening. It's all the same thing. Rosicrucian Francis Bacon wrote The New Atlantis. Rosicrucian Thomas Paine wrote The Age of Reason. The Rosicrucian Georgia Guidestones are inscribed with, Let these be guidestones to an age of reason. Rosicrucian texts announced an unknown esoteric order to the world. The Rosicrucian Fellowship was founded with the aim of heralding the Aquarian Age. The Masons produced New Age magazines and used the phrase Novus Ordo Seclorum, or New Order of the Ages. W.Q. Judge was a Freemason and a co-founder of Theosophy with Madame Blavatsky. He said it would not be possible to prevent the New Age from entering the occult realm. Aleister Crowley called it the Age or Eon of Horus, and Alice Bailey called it the Age of Aquarius or the New Age. Almost the full set. Now we just got to deal with Lucifer. Lucifer is the feminine aspect of Satan. Yeah, I know it's weird. Also known as the Morning Star, Ishtar, Isis, Venus, Sophia, Gaia, or Mother Earth. The mother of revered Freemason Manly p.hall was a member of the Rosicrucian Fellowship. He wrote, "When the Mason learns that the key to the warrior on the block is the proper application of the dynamo of living power, he has learned the mystery of his craft. The seething energies of Lucifer are in his hands." Famous Mason Albert Pike wrote, "Lucifer, the light-bearer, strange and mysterious name to give to the spirit of darkness. Lucifer, the son of the morning, is it he who bears the light, and with its splendours intolerable, blinds feeble, sensual, or selfish souls? Doubt it not."
Now, did you just say that you are Lucifer?
I am Lucifer.
Okay, define Lucifer for me.
Pure, virtuous, wholesome, innocent individual that's out to help people.
See, this is what a Mason confesses, is that Lucifer is light.
Madame Blavatsky wrote, "Their prince is called in the Kabbalah Samael, the angel of death, who is also the seducing serpent, Satan. But that Satan is also Lucifer, the bright angel of light, the light and life bringer." Aleister Crowley wrote, "This serpent Satan is not the enemy of man, but he who made gods of our race, knowing good and evil. He bade know thyself and taught initiation. He is therefore life and love, but moreover his letter is Ayin, the I. He is light." And of course, Alice Bailey started the Lucifer Publishing Company. Lucis Trust is recognized by the United Nations as a non-governmental organization with consultative status. Lucifer Publishing or Lucis Trust have people placed around the world called the New Group of World Servers. They serve the spiritual hierarchy of the planet, the entities or demons they communicate with. The New Group of World Servers are the people who are building the New World Order. When Alice Bailey channeled the Ascended Master Dujwal Khul, he said their name is Legion. Jesus declared, "Come out of this man, you unclean spirit." "What is your name?" Jesus asked. "My name is Legion," he replied, "for we are many." Here's a map showing the worldwide network of servers. According to Dujwal Khul, this great group constitutes the world's saviour at this time. The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation are listed as one of the financial groups of the New Group of World Servers. Lucis Trust said, "The money energy is beginning to flow into new channels and through the philanthropic and humanitarian work of such people as George Soros, Bill Gates, Kofi Annan, and Bono." Lucis Trust also has groups of light workers around the world, known as triangles.
In our rapidly changing world, people who know how to work with energy can have a key role to play in aiding our planet in its shift to a higher level of consciousness.
The New Group of World Servers are pioneers of the emerging spiritual civilization in the Age of Aquarius. They align with the forces of light to become a co-creator of the New World, using white magic. Alice Bailey said, "This new group of world servers is an aspect of the world Antikarana, and it gives students of the Antikarana a sound example of the intent and purpose of the Rainbow Bridge, which each disciple is endeavouring consciously to build." Constance Cumby warned of the dangers of the rainbow and the New Age. Although the rainbow seems to be only a coloured arc of light, refracted through raindrops, to both Christians and New Agers it has a deep meaning. According to the Bible, the rainbow is symbolic of God's everlasting covenant that he would never again destroy the earth by a flood. However, the New Age movement uses rainbows to signify their building of the Rainbow Bridge, Antikarana, between man and Lucifer, who they say is the Oversoul. Dujwal Khul says, Those whom the new group of world servers influence and with whom they seek to work, and who can act as their agents, we call the men and women of goodwill. Goodwill is one of the most basic spiritual qualities of the human being, and the great untapped resource at the heart of every human community. This energy is potentially a powerful force for social change. People of goodwill are those who think and act with a measure of loving understanding and of concern for the well-being of all. They inform the public of the principles and programs of the United Nations, a major externalized focal point of the energy of goodwill. World goodwill is at the United Nations. They are known as goodwill ambassadors or messengers of peace. Lady Gaga's mother is a goodwill ambassador for the World Health Organization.
Do you record while the bus is moving, or does it have to come to a stop?
Yeah, well, sometimes they don't want to, and they're, Gaga, we can't get, the frequency's weird, and, it's sounding a little bit strange, and I'm like, if you don't get this right now, I swear to Lucifer, I'm gonna...
The Findhorn Foundation are listed as a member of the new group of world servers, who are affiliated with the United Nations, and run the Spiritual Caucus at the United Nations, with Gaia, United Religions, Lucis Trust and World Goodwill. The meditation room at the United Nations was remodeled by Dag Hammarskjöld, a former Secretary General. He said, "The stone in the middle of the room has more to tell us. We may see it as an altar, empty not because there is no God, not because it is an altar to an unknown God, but because it is dedicated to the God whom man worships under many names and in many forms." U Thant, Secretary General of the United Nations, and Pope Paul spent time together in the meditation room.
It's amazing. Just being in this dining room, you can hear all the different international accents. People have flown in from all over the world, but there's a big carbon footprint that's associated with that. How do you deal with that?
That's a concern. So we try to live our lives in a way that is gentle on the earth, but we are looking at the whole question of so many visitors coming from so far.
The Findhorn Foundation is a spiritual eco-village started by Peter and Eileen Caddy and Dorothy McLean. Here's Eileen Caddy.
And I said, God, what can I do? My life is in such a mess. And then I heard the voice. And the voice said, be still and know that I am God. And I feel also I'm an anchor. I anchor the energies. Otherwise I probably wouldn't be here at all. But I am anchoring the Christ energies, the spiritual energies.
For services to spiritual inquiry, Eileen Caddy was awarded the MBE by Queen Elizabeth II of the United Kingdom. Dorothy McLean worked for a branch of MI6 during the war, authorised by Winston Churchill. It operated from the Rockefeller Center. McLean was known for her work with divas, said to be intelligences overseeing the natural world.
Ordinary people are here on this earth, and so are the angels. I mean, so are the devas. It is a working collaboration. It's always been here. We just haven't recognized it.
In 1970, David Spangler came to Findhorn. He claimed to have been told by spiritual entities that he would find his next cycle of work in Europe. Eileen Caddy had a vision 3 years earlier that a David Spangler would be coming there to live and work in the community.
I was invited to come out to this group and give a series of lectures, which I did. But in the course of doing the lectures, I thought, wow, this is a whole new world for me. I really don't know what it means to be a spiritual teacher. This is not what I was training for. and I need help. And about a week after voicing that, this being appeared. It literally walked through the wall and appeared while I was eating breakfast and basically said, I'm the help. And that was John. That was the being that I called John.
William Bloom is a member of the Findhorn Foundation and also a trustee of Glastonbury Abbey.
Well, going back to Christianity and historical roots, we come back to a personal historical Jesus, and there are clear external objective statements that Jesus made. One of them, for instance, was that I am the way, the truth and the life. You can't get to the Father except through me. It's not just a personal belief. There are outside external statements about Jesus Christ himself. How do you cope with that?
Well, I have some problems with the way you express it. I have some real problems with it because it excludes huge numbers of people from sharing that experience unless they've actually seen the words and read the book. There's certain things that are inbuilt into human beings. And when we read the New Testament, wonderful. We have a teacher echoing what we already know, but you don't need to have read it in order to know it. What we're talking about is a principle running through the whole of creation that expresses love and kindness and nurture and holds things so they can grow, the Christ. Now that essence, that extraordinary aspect of cosmic consciousness enters into humanity in different ways at different times.
He says all four founders of the Findhorn Foundation were trained in metaphysics and esoterics. By this I mean they were educated and practiced in the principles and concepts of subtle energies and their cosmic context. Their major sources were the Rosicrucian, Hermetic and Theosophical schools. They believe too that our planet and species are at a crucial stage of evolution, and their purpose was to cooperate and support this evolutionary step forward through the project of the Findhorn Foundation. They also believed that the Findhorn Foundation was part of a divine plan, and they followed inner guidance on how to lead its development. Satish Kumar is one of the Findhorn Fellows.
God is not separate somewhere sitting in the sky. The whole creation is a dance of God.
Oh, beautiful dance, I agree.
Yes.
What if it isn't a tradition? What if it's a given truth that God has held himself separate from his creators? In the Bible, it says there's the creatures and the creator.
I think this approach of dualism, this separation, has caused a lot of problems in our human society and our relationship between nature and humans. I think the new development, that's why it's a new age, new development of our thinking and understanding has to be that we are not separate and God is not separate.
I get lost with the number of gods, you know.
I don't think there's any separation at the end of it. We are all divine. We are the manifestation of God.
You know. You're not relying for a teacher or someone else to tell you. The authority of your learning lies within you. The joy and the glory is us coming together and being able to do that ourselves because we have everything that we need.
It's at the edge of our comfort zone that life begins. Come to the edge, Apollinaire wrote. Come to the edge. We can't, we'll fall. Come to the edge. We can't, we're afraid. Come to the edge. And they came, and he pushed them, and they flew. What Findhorn brings to the human spirit is the possibility of flying.
I said, God, either come to me now and give me some answers, or I'm out of here. And I was
Meaning suicide?
Yeah, absolutely.
You were that low?
I was that low, the
what happened?
nadir of my existence. And Larry, I heard a voice as clearly as I'm hearing your own now, right over my right shoulder. So clearly that I turned around, I thought literally that someone had come into the room. It's 4:30 in the morning. And the voice said, Neil, do you really want answers to all of these questions, or are you just venting? And I can recall my response after I got over the shock of not finding anyone there. I thought, well, I am venting, but if you've got answers, I'd like to know what they are. And with that, I received the answers to the most astonishing questions. and the most extraordinary answers.
In the Iona report written by David Spangler, he reports that Eileen Caddy had a vision in which she says, "I saw the Archangel St. Michael, aka Lucifer. He had a foot on Glastonbury, a foot at Findhorn, and a sword pointing to Iona, as if uniting the three." David also says that the two main planetary centres of Britain are Glastonbury and Iona, and they are being joined by Findhorn, and that there is a link between these three which form a triangle. In 1971, Andrew Kerr staged Glastonbury Fair, along with Arabella Churchill. Like Winston Churchill, Andrew Kerr could trace his ancestry back through a couple of female lines to the first Duke of Marlborough. His original motivation for staging a free festival was outlined in a leaflet published at the time. Man is fast ruining his environment. He is suffering from the effects of pollution, from the neurosis brought about by a basically urban industrial society, from the lack of spirituality in his life. The aims are, therefore, the conservation of our natural resources, a respect for nature and life, and a spiritual awakening.
I was personal assistant to Randolph Churchill, Sir Winston Churchill's only son, and Arabella was about 8 when I first met Randolph in 1957.
Basically, Andrew Carr, who used to work for my father, went down to the farm and decided he was going to run a free festival.
She came down when she was about 19, 20, and she was kind of a bit of a sort of debutante figure, got into the flower power thing. And so she turned up with some money to help, and she's been around here ever since.
The pyramid stage was inspired by the work of author John Mitchell. The tone of his work reflected a fervent religious feeling, describing the existence of an ancient universal and true system of belief that was once spread across the ancient world, but which had been lost through the degeneracy of subsequent generations. He added, however, that this ancient knowledge would be revived with the dawning of the age of Aquarius, allowing for what Mitchell described as the rediscovery of access to the divine will. Here's the cover of his book with the compass from Freemasonry. Early performers at Glastonbury included David Bowie.
I fell into the trap of the black magic, Kabbalism, and the whole idea of just the Crowleyism of the times. It was a significant part of that middle point of the 70s, and I really got completely disoriented by all that. It was an awful, dreadful period for me.
David Spangler helped William Irwin Thompson found the Lindisfarne Association. It was for the study and realization of a new planetary culture.
My imaginary friends, invisible friends, are angels and jinn and stellar beings, talking about Arcturus, and that I can go into trance and in meditation experience these beings.
Lindisfarne was inspired by Teilhard de Chardin's idea of planetization and funded by the Rockefellers as lifestyle experiments.
I had, at the beginning, grants from the Lilly Endowment, Rockefeller Brothers Fund. Lawrence Rockefeller came to one of my lectures at the Cathedrals, St. John the Divine. It might have been the one you were in. So the Village Voice wrote an article about, hey, get your lifestyle, and talked about hippies and Rockefellers, in the same audience listening to me. And Lawrence invited me to lunch next day, and said, would you like some money? And so he became my patron.
United Nations Under-Secretary Maurice Strong was a member. He offered to donate land from his ranch in Crestone, Colorado, to Lindisfarne. In 1979, Hannah Strong, wife of Maurice Strong, invited several organizations to locate in the Baca Grande after a visit from Prophet Glenn Anderson. These included the Lindisfarne Association. Hannah Strong said, many people throughout the valley knew Glenn as the local mystic and prophet. His first words were, I have been waiting for you to arrive. Over the course of the next 4 days, he transmitted what he had received from Spirit about the future purpose of this land and my role in fulfilling this vision.
I went up in the mountains, meditated for 4 days and 4 nights, and I was told by Spirit, you're not leaving till you get the map. So, well, what map? So I had a little piece of paper and I started putting all the world religions into the mountain. You know, I drew pictures of the mountain, put all the world religions in, and I was allowed to go.
Hannah started the Manitou Foundation, and her patron was Lawrence Rockefeller. Economist Hazel Henderson was a member of Lindisfarne.
This is another whole dimension of slow motion good news, is you see people at the local level building the eco-villages. And I have been quite involved with many of these organizations from Findhorn in Scotland. All the great religions that have developed in the world's cultures have at their core, they're very similar ideas. And as I looked at them, and I wonder, why is it they are always fighting with each other when the ideas at the core are so similar? And they are the golden rule, that do as you would be done by. This is in every major religious tradition. And the other is that each one of us has a spark of the divine within us.
Hazel Henderson is on the advisory board of the Teilhard de Chardin Association. William Bloom writes, so the suggestion here is that the Findhorn Foundation was purposely created as a vehicle through which the avatar of synthesis could land and help humanity and Gaia. As well as touching down through the Findhorn Foundation, I have heard people suggest that it also landed in other places, such as the Esalen Institute in California. Lindisfarne member Michael Murphy is the co-founder of the Esalen Institute, which became the center of practices and beliefs that make up the New Age movement.
We are embodied, latently spiritual creatures, and we are part of the cosmic adventure, which is evolutionary, and which in today's kind of parlance, words that people can understand, a kind of panentheism, the doctrine that the divine is both transcendent and immanent, and that the evolution is the unfoldment of our latent divinity.
Esalen received finance from Lawrence Rockefeller. A great description of the Esalen Institute was spray-painted on the entrance in 1990 by a graffiti artist. It said, "Jive shit for rich white folk." In 1989, Esalen hosted Boris Yeltsin during his first visit to the US, claiming he had a transformational experience there which culminated in his renunciation of communism. Michael Murphy and Aldous Huxley were at the forefront of expounding on themes of human potential at Esalen. Michael Hollingshead claimed to have been the first to try LSD. He contacted Aldous Huxley, who suggested he get in contact with Timothy Leary. Shortly thereafter, he introduced Leary to LSD. Timothy Leary was also a member of the Esalen Institute.
Well, I've been an admirer of Aleister Crowley. I think that I'm carrying on much of the work that he started over 100 years ago, and I think the 60s themselves. You know, Crowley said he was in favor of finding your own self and do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law under love. It was a very powerful statement. I'm sorry he isn't around now to appreciate the glories that he started.
Michael Hollingshead then set up a research project with Gene Houston for the book The Varieties of Psychedelic Experience.
In March of 1963, when I was just barely out of my teens, I woke up to a phone call from a friend. Aldous Huxley wants to meet you. Me? What? Me? And I couldn't figure out why, except that I had the only legal supply of LSD in New York City.
The Esalen Institute played a key role in the human potential movement. Funding was provided by Lawrence Rockefeller. Gene Houston was a member.
But his sister Cheryl, my friend, is 12 years old, And she is playing Sim City and Civilization, and she is constructing vast edifices of new civilizations and has to understand ecology, agronomy, you know, relationships, agriculture, I mean, so many different things. And these people are, what are they doing? They're on the internet doing it, they're playing it in cyberspace. They are creating virtual realities, and they are living in these virtual realities as avatars or as gods. And it's as if our children are being trained, are gods in training. Now you may say there's better places for it, but I mean, the fact is, whether you like it or not, this is what they're doing. And the whole line between what is real and what is virtual, you know, in cyberspace, it is called a virtual world. It then leads me to ask the ultimate theological question: are we really gods in human suits?
Since 2003, she has been working with the United Nations Development Programme. She's met Jimmy Carter and leaders in many countries. In her student days, she worked closely with Eleanor Roosevelt. Houston facilitated a creative thinking role-playing exercise wherein Hillary Clinton engaged in imaginary dialogues with Gandhi and Eleanor Roosevelt. When the media subsequently beat a path to her door, Houston said, "I have never been to a seance."
And a special thanks to the members of the Roosevelt family who are here, and to one who is not, Eleanor, who made sure that the four freedoms were included in the preamble to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in 1948. I know that because, as all of you famously learned when I served as president, my wife, now the Secretary of State, was known to commune with Eleanor on a regular basis. And so she called me last night on her way home from Peru to remind me to say that Eleanor had talked to her and reminded her that I should say that.
Jean Houston is promoted on the Spiritual Life TV channel, as well as Dujwal Kul.
And it is, some of you know that as a child, I walked with an old man who I called Mr. Taylor, who turned out to be Teilhard de Chardin, who lived across the street from me on 84th Street and Park Avenue. "Ah, Jean, the people of your time, they will be taking the tiller of the world, but it will be all connected. It will be the noosphere. Oh, Jean, you must touch every culture, every people, otherwise it will not happen." We are in the noosphere. We are living in what he saw in 1955.
Marilyn Ferguson was a member. She influenced Vice President Al Gore, who met her in the White House. She wrote The Aquarian Conspiracy, and one of her great influences was Teilhard de Chardin. Scientist James Lovelock was a member of Lindisfarne. He is best known for proposing the Gaia hypothesis, which postulates that the Earth functions as a self-regulating system. William Irwin Thompson, the founder of Lindisfarne, wrote a book called Gaia, and on the Gaia website they promote Alice Bailey. Many of the Findhorn Fellows are connected to Gaia. Lucifer is one of various figures in folklore associated with the planet Venus. Madame Blavatsky wrote, while Venus, otherwise Lucifer or Satan. Blavatsky's book The Secret Doctrine equates Venus with Gaia, Earth. She says Venus is the later mythological variant of Gaia, the Earth. Luke Jerram's illuminated planet called Gaia Cumin has been exhibited in many cathedrals. Therefore, metaphorically, Lucifer is in the church. One of the branches of Lindisfarne was in New York City at the Cathedral of St. John the Divine. A cathedral revered by the Masonic world. Known as the Green Cathedral, it has become the heart of a thriving community of cultural evolutionaries. James Parks Morton was a member of Lindisfarne and the Dean of the Cathedral of St. John the Divine. He pushed interfaith.
And so I invited really the most interesting and distinguished, fascinating people I could find who were Hindus and who were Jews and who were Muslims and who were Buddhists to be in the pulpit of the cathedral. So when I left the cathedral, I really knew that I wanted to do something that could make interfaith itself a living experience for everybody in their different religions. And so that's what I, with a small group of fellow criminals, created in 97. And we called it the Interfaith Center of New York, because there wasn't such a thing.
Composer Paul Winter is a member of Lindisfarne. He met James Parks Morton, who invited him to become an artist in residence at the cathedral. Here he is at the Global Forum in 1992.
Please join me in a hallelujah chorus for Mother Earth. I feel it's appropriate at a gathering such as this that the animals should be heard as well as all the human voices.
He holds the Missa Gaia Earth Mass at the cathedral each year in celebration of the earth. Ujwal Kaul says, disciples everywhere will present increasingly the hierarchical plan of brotherhood, spiritual living and inclusiveness to the world.
This cathedral has a history of being very supportive of LGBTQ people.
I'm Marty Cummings, my pronouns are they, them, and I am incredibly grateful to be part of a congregation that is so welcoming and loving at St. John the Divine. The cathedral is completely in line with the teachings of Jesus in that they are loving of all people.
In 1984, Edwina Sandy's Christa was displayed in the cathedral as part of an exhibition on the feminine divine. It's a sculpture of Jesus as a woman. The artist, Edwina Sandys, is the granddaughter of Winston Churchill. So now we know why the New Age and LGBT both use the rainbow, and why our governments use it too. Also housed at the cathedral was the Temple of Understanding. The Temple of Understanding is proud to have received accreditation from the United Nations. They have colleagues in the Faith and Biodiversity United Nations Coordination Group, and they marry faith and the environment at COP15. Edith Roosevelt said the temple received financial backing from John D. Rockefeller IV. The Temple of Understanding rented their New York headquarters from the Teilhard de Chardin Association. Eleanor Roosevelt was among the first to endorse the temple. She said, "May this greatly needed Temple of Understanding come into realization soon, for our world surely needs the inspiration and leadership of such a spiritual United Nations." Founding friends of the temple include two popes. They are interested in global citizenship, human survival, and they work with the United Nations Environmental Programme. Stephen Rockefeller attended their 50th anniversary with Robert Thurman, who married Timothy Leary's ex-wife and had Uma Thurman, and was the first American Buddhist monk ordained by the Dalai Lama. Mary Evelyn Tucker attended the anniversary. She is the granddaughter of the ambassador to Spain under Franklin Roosevelt.
Genesis 1:26. God blessed them, and God said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the air, and over every living thing that moves upon the earth." Well, from an ecological systems perspective, I would say mission accomplished. We have done that. But what you're saying is now religious scholars are changing the perception of the text, of the words, of what was meant by subdue and dominion. And then a related question is, when these words were written by humans all those centuries ago, the earth was not full ecologically. And so it was a different environmental time when those things were written. What do you think about all that?
Well, that's exactly to the point, and that's why I led with the dominion passage, because everybody comes to that. So you're hitting the really hot spot. And we have to remember, though, other religions don't even have a passage close to that. And when we get to the Asian religions, I'll illustrate that. So this text is definitely being reinterpreted, and widely reinterpreted.
She is on the advisory board of the Teilhard de Chardin Association. Tucker studied world religions with Thomas Berry, who is a founding friend of the Temple of Understanding.
When we say the universe is, in a certain sense, divine, that's the purpose of the whole thing, the divine wishing to share itself. And it shares itself in a most magnificent way by enabling the universe to create itself. Now, it's a much more fascinating idea of creation than to figure that God made this and put it there, and God made that, and God made something else, and ended up with a well-arranged universe.
He was influenced by the work of Teilhard de Chardin and served as president of the American Teilhard Association. Another founding friend was Hugh Thant, third Secretary General of the United Nations. He embraced the concepts of Teilhard de Chardin and was also a member of Planetary Citizens. Donald Keyes was a speechwriter for Hugh Thant and founder of Planetary Citizens. He ran workshops at the Findhorn Foundation. He wrote a book called The United Nations and Planetary Consciousness. In another book, he lists as one of his mentors Lujwal Kul. The founder of Lindisfarne, William Irwin Thompson, was a member, and David Spangler, as well as Ervin Laszlo from the Club of Budapest. Donald Keyes was the World Association of World Federalists representative to the United Nations. The One World Trust is one of the World Federalist organizations. Established in 1951 in support of the All-Party Group for World Government, the Trust continues to have a close relationship with the UK Parliament. So are these politicians working for the people or for a world government? Planetary Citizens website features Thrive the movie, shown below with the one-eye symbolism, and the movie Zeitgeist, which attacked Christianity. Planetary Citizens understand the term New World Order has mixed emotional perspectives. Our world needs a new order. Zen, from the Planetary Citizens website, describes an experience he had whilst meditating to music.
Initially, when I was listening to this, a voice that I had been familiar with since I was a child asked me by name if I was willing to die for what I was believed in.
Yeah.
And I, after I clenched up for a moment, thinking, I'm being called on my question now. So what do I believe in? My first thought was Christ consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
Sat with that for a moment, didn't quite feel complete. Next thought was cosmic consciousness. That felt more cohesive and comprehensive.
Mm-hmm.
And so I said yes. At that moment, there was a guitar riff on the album that facilitated an out-of-body experience. I turned and looked at my body laying across my dorm room bed as I was leaving, and turned back to look where I was going, and before I could turn around, there was this white light that completely surrounded me.
Mm-hmm.
And it felt so like home, beyond anything I'd ever expressed or imagined it could feel like. And then once I was in it, I realized, okay, I can still think, because I can see, and I can think about what I'm seeing. I can think about the tactile sensations or the lack of them, actually. And then I thought, okay, wow, is there more? And I felt a movement, very slight but definite, and found myself in a sphere of pinpoints of light with an indigo background. Upon my initial question of, okay, what are these points of light? The understanding that came almost immediately was they were points of consciousness. Now, whether in body or not, I wasn't sure, because I knew I wasn't at the time. And then the voice picked back up, and verbatim it says to me, these are those that you are to work with in order to facilitate a new world order.
Maurice Strong was a member and a director of the World Future Society that wants to awaken the futurist mindset in everyone in order to co-create new civilization systems. Members include Newt Gingrich, Al Gore, and Alvin Toffler, who said, "A new civilization is emerging in our lives, and blind men everywhere are trying to suppress it. This new civilization brings with it new family styles, changed ways of working, loving and living, a new economy, new political conflicts, and beyond all this, an altered consciousness as well. The dawn of this new civilization is the single most explosive fact of our lifetimes. China's government cited him along with Franklin Roosevelt and Bill Gates as being among the Westerners who had most influenced their country. Newt Gingrich urged members of Congress to read Toffler's book, Creating a New Civilization. Ted Turner, founder of CNN, published Toffler's book, Creating a New Civilization. Mikhail Gorbachev hosted the Global Governance Conference in San Francisco with the theme, Towards a New Civilization.
I think even that does not describe why the world has changed so much and why the world has turned so much toward a new world order and a new kind of civilization.
Hazel Henderson is another world futurist, and Barbara Marx Hubbard.
We shall now receive a nomination for Vice President of the United States. This is the first of the two nominations that you will receive. We've had two valid petitions received by the Secretary of this convention. We shall have now the nomination of Barbara Marx Hubbard of California.
Our forebears set forth the vision. It is written on the dollar bill as it is written in our hearts. E pluribus unum, out of many one. Novus ordo seclorum, a new order of the ages. You see the unfinished pyramid with the cosmic eye. This means that when we combine our magnificent building power with our spirit and love, we will have a new order of the ages. And finally it says, annuit ceptis, God favors this enterprise. This means that we are not doing this work alone. The force is with us.
Neil Donald Walsh wrote the foreword to her book, The Evolutionary Testament of Co-Creation. She dedicates the book to Lawrence Rockefeller, who recognized its purpose to help bring forth the Christ of the 21st century, and supported me in forming the Foundation for Conscious Evolution to bring it forward into the world. In another book, she states that Rockefeller had supported her work for 10 years.
I got to meet President Eisenhower in 1953 in the Oval Office.
The Gaia website promotes her work.
And I've been on a long journey, and I want to tell you what I think I found out. And it started for me with Teilhard de Chardin. When I read The Phenomenon of Man in the 1960s, he was the first person who made the meaning of evolution for me. He said, take away God, take away Christ, give me matter. And he saw in matter what he called the law of complexity consciousness.
Another futurist is Margaret Mead. Lucis Trust quotes her saying, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has. Margaret Mead was on the advisory board of the American Teilhard Association.
My claim to fame is I'm one of the best traveled human beings who's ever lived. I've worked in over 100 countries and deeply in some 40 cultures. I was trained by Margaret Mead, who was my adopted mother, and she sent me all over the world to study these shifts, and this is back in the 1970s.
There won't be such a thing as the family. The family in general is a crazy piece of fiction.
Margaret Mead and Alfred Kinsey were both key players in the sexual revolution. Kinsey obtained research funding from the Rockefeller Foundation. The Aquarian Age community is a branch of Lucis Trust that supports the spiritual work of the United Nations, or the New World Order. They quote Alice Bailey, increasingly, many within the world community recognize the spiritual heartbeat of this global organization. Many of these individuals and groups recognize the existing symbiotic relationship between the plan of love and light, that is the spiritual destiny of humanity, and the goals and objectives of the United Nations. June 1945 was a pivotal time on our planet. The birth of the UN signaled the attainment of a critical benchmark in humanity's history and spiritual progress. It occurred at the same time that the Christ took over his duties and responsibilities as the spiritual teacher and leader during this dawning solar cycle of Aquarius. They say the Charter of the United Nations is the 10 Commandments of nation states. John D. Rockefeller donated the money for the land that the United Nations building stands on. In 2015, Lucis Trust announced that World Goodwill will be working to seed the UN Year of Light as another step in preparing the way for the reappearance of the Christ. The UN Year of Light marks a period in human evolution when the heavens have opened and light is descending all around us, so beautifully symbolized by the all-seeing eye of space telescopes that catch the light that emerges from the distant depths of the cosmos. The time has arrived for this to be paralleled by inner vision, etheric sight, and the opening of the third eye. We hope you will join us in the group service and help to anchor the vision of humanity's next step forward on its remarkable journey into an age of light. The United Nations holds group meditations, which are run by this guy.
As regards my own spirituality, as regards my coming over to the West, I could say that in my case, I do not make any choice. I have no freedom of my own. If just today, if my inner pilot commands me to go back to India, I will be the happiest person. And I always listen to the dictates of my inner pilot. For me, there is no such thing as America or India or Europe or Africa. This world belongs to my inner pilot.
Their meditations conclude with the great invocation. This is a world prayer used by people of goodwill worldwide to invoke the light, love, and spiritual direction needed to create right relationships on Earth, and produced by Lucifer Publishing, Lucis Trust.
From the point of light within the mind of God, let light stream forth into human minds. Let light descend on earth. From the point of love within the heart of God, let love stream forth into human hearts. May the coming one return to earth.
On World Invocation Day in 1952, Eleanor Roosevelt read the Great Invocation. It was recorded at the United Nations. Dujwal Khul said, "The era of one humanity is upon us. I ask you to drop your antagonisms and your antipathies, your hatreds and your racial differences, and attempt to think in terms of the one family, the one life, and the one humanity." It's pretty obvious that the United Nations is based on the messages from Dujwal Khul, channeled through Alice Bailey. Alice Bailey said, "We know that the avatar of synthesis is already overshadowing the work of the UN General Assembly, but the tremendous potency of directed purpose which will be released by the avatar, in cooperation with the Christ, through the General Assembly, must be released with great care." In her book Discipleship in the New Age, Alice Bailey says, "Evidence, however, of the growth of the human intellect along the needed receptive lines can be seen in the planning of the various nations, and in the efforts of the United Nations to formulate a world plan which will eventuate in peace, security, and right human relations. It is interesting to note that from the very start of this unfoldment, 3 occult factors have governed the development of all these plans." She doesn't tell us what those occult factors were, though. But she does reveal how the planet is governed. The plan for humanity requires the cooperation and service of trained and dedicated human beings, intelligently informed about world affairs, in collaboration with those who form the spiritual hierarchy, the inner government of the planet.
But, of course, behind that, for me, was this ongoing relationship with the beings I call my subtle colleagues, or in a fit of whimsy one day, I called them my pit crew, and that's kind of stuck. And it's very much an image out of NASCAR racing. And the pit crew keeps you going. And in a way, these are beings with whom I've been partnering now for really since the 60s. But we don't partner in a, they're here to be my teacher, they're here to give me guidance. We partner because we're engaged in a joint project. We're doing a job together. So in that sense, they're like office mates. They're my working partners in this context of incarnational spirituality.
The divine plan for humanity. The development of a new humanity. A planetary awakening driven by the United Nations and Lucis Trust. These are the steps towards the New World Order. The United Nations New World Order Project.
We have a real chance at this New World Order, an order in which a credible United Nations can use its peacekeeping role to fulfill the promise and vision of the UN's founders.
Robert Mueller. He was the Assistant Secretary General for the United Nations. His ideas about world government, world peace and spirituality led to the increased representation of religions in the UN, especially of the New Age movement. He wrote, Mother Earth should be renamed Goddess Earth. God made only one mistake when he created the Earth. It was to create man. He organized the first census of the planet Earth. Mueller created a world core curriculum that earned him the UNESCO Prize for Peace Education. The underlying philosophy upon which the Robert Mueller School is based will be found in the teachings set forth in the books of Alice Bailey by the Tibetan teacher Dujwal Khul. Robert Mueller wrote, why don't we coin two more words, paradising and happinizing, to create paradise and achieve happiness on earth? Jamie Ilian is the founder of Happitalism and CEO of the United Nations New World Order Project, which places the primacy of happiness, well-being and freedom at the centre of economic development and all life. The United Nations International Day of Happiness is driving towards a universal well-being, and global happiness is just that, a universal well-being. On the Lucis Trust website is the Wellbeing Economy Alliance, which represents a shift from us versus them to we all, co-creating new powerful narratives of hope. At COP26.
Common Ground Festival, how return!
Hey, it's so fantastic to see you tonight.
We're fired up here on this panel. I'm enjoying this a lot.
The elephant in the room when it comes to climate talks is an economy that is based on more and more economic growth.
The Common Ground Festival is all about educating, inspiring and signposting the general public to action.
If that's mixing music, poetry, and intellectual thought leadership, that is the best way that we can move forward together and start to hit people's hearts, heads, and souls.
Jennifer Morgan, Executive Director of Greenpeace International, said, we set up a new world order after World War II. We're now in a different world than we were then. We need to ask, what can we do differently? The World Economic Forum has a big responsibility in that as well, to be pushing the reset button and looking at how to create well-being for people and for the earth. The United Nations partnered with the World Economic Forum to accelerate the implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. The World Economic Forum says the language of a new normal is being deployed almost as a way to quell any uncertainty ushered in by the coronavirus. With no cure in sight, everyone from politicians and the media to friends and family has perpetuated this rhetoric as they imagine settling into life under this new normal. This framing is inviting. It contends that things will never be the same as they were before. So welcome to a new world order. Here's the founder, Klaus Schwab, in his Star Trek outfit. He says Maurice Strong was his mentor since the creation of the forum, a great friend, an indispensable advisor, and for many years a member of our foundation board. Without him, the forum would not have achieved its present significance. The World Economic Forum had its world control computer system ready to roll out in 2020. All they needed was a crisis. They could then step in with their global future councils.
The future is not just happening. The future is built by us, by a powerful community as you here in this room.
Does capitalism need some Marxism to survive the fourth industrial revolution? Greta Thunberg thinks it's time to transform the West's oppressive and racist capitalist system. But, of course, she's in the One-Eyed Club. And good friends with Jane Goodall, who was interviewed by Lucis Trust, studied theosophy in her youth, and she's a UN messenger of peace. Alice Bailey wrote, "Each disciple should be strictly vegetarian. The lower nature becomes clogged and heavy, and the inner blaze cannot shine forth when meat is included in the diet." In 2007, Lucis Trust said, "Interestingly, there are now ideas in the public arena about the wisdom of using scarce resources, such as farmland and oil, to produce meat, when it is much more energy efficient to feed crops directly to humans." Lucis Trust say, the next stage of humanity's evolutionary growth is to face the crisis of freedom from material desire. The World Economic Forum partnered with the World Health Organization. All three institutes controlled by the serpent. The World Health Organization receives funding from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. They partnered with Global Citizen to announce One World Together at Home during the crisis. They want a human metamorphosis, the evolution of humanity, where everything is interconnected and we are illuminated. The Global Citizen Forum is a knowledge contributor to the World Government Summit, who are shaping future governments.
Highnesses, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, a very, very good morning on what is the first official day of World Government Summit here at Dubai Expo 2020. And the title of this session, Are we ready for a new world order?
Hugh Evans, co-founder and CEO of Global Citizen, received the George H.W. Bush Points of Light Award. Remember Zen and what he said about points of light?
Upon my initial question of, okay, what are these points of light? The understanding that came almost immediately was they were points of consciousness.
The points of consciousness are other light workers like himself across the globe working towards the divine plan.
I've spoken of 1,000 points of light, of all the community organizations that are spread like stars throughout the nation doing good. We will work hand in hand, encouraging, sometimes leading, sometimes being led, rewarding. We will work on this in the White House, in the cabinet agencies. I will go to the people and the programs that are the brighter points of light, and I'll ask every member of my government to become involved.
The modern-day Rosicrucians say, in the 21st century, we feel strongly that these teachings will play an increasingly important role in humanity's evolution. With fast-paced technological advancement and its effects upon the environment and the human psyche, people are searching for an inner, ever-reliable source of strength and balance. Perhaps now, more than ever, we are reaching out for understanding, for mystical illumination. The Club of Rome talks about emerging new civilizations. Members include former heads of state from around the world, including Mikhail Gorbachev, who was interviewed by the Lucis Trust Good News Agency on the subject of Towards a New Civilization. David Rockefeller, who admits in his memoirs to conspiring with others around the world to create a one-world government, and he's proud of it. Maurice Strong, Bill Gates and Al Gore, and Hazel Henderson. Kofi Annan, one of the new group of world servers, is listed as a member of the Club of Madrid. Here's the club's promotional video. Listen out for the words evolve, diversity, inclusive, and well-being.
Every time we take a step, we move forward. Every step forward, we evolve. As the world changes at the rhythm of our steps, responsible leadership is what allows us to keep moving forward. To evolve is to deal with the new challenges that we face every day. sustainability, diversity, technology, peace. And this is best achieved by fostering and strengthening inclusive and plural democracies that will improve the well-being of people around the globe. And in this ever-changing world, that is the mission of Club de Madrid, translating this democratic vision into positive change in our lives. Club de Madrid is the world's largest forum of democratic former presidents and prime ministers that leverages their experience to create spaces for dialogue, build bridges, give voice to those otherwise not heard, and provide advice to current leaders at a national and multilateral level on the challenges they face.
The Lucis Trust Good News Agency interviewed Ervin Laszlo, the founder of the Club of Budapest. He wrote the Manifesto on the Spirit of Planetary Consciousness with the Dalai Lama.
The bridge-building process, which is at the heart of the club's work, also includes the decisions that we've made to create safe spaces for leaders, whether it's in business or science or the arts or politics, religion, philosophy, to come together and bring their skills, their window of awareness on the world, which is a more global or planetary one, to bring that into a rich conversation with decision makers, people who are impacting every day of their working lives the human future.
And one of the things I would love to see is for us to have groups of people down here, people who could really make a difference in the world, people who would come down here to talk, to feel that they're in a safe space, to just privately put their aims and ideals and dreams to each other. And in this way we could make tremendous progress out of the glare of the modern spotlight.
Members include Deepak Chopra, Desmond Tutu, the Dalai Lama, and Sharon Stone, who were all involved in the movie called The Invocation. Barbara Goen-Muller, the wife of Robert Muller and member of the Club of Budapest, was also involved with the movie Invocation.
We are members of a new movie that's out called Invocation, and I'll send you the website so you can see it. And it's the feeling of Emmanuel Etier, a Frenchman, that until the religions agree that we can have disagreements about how we worship, how we care for our spirituality, we won't have wars. It doesn't have to shoot each other because we disagree about how to serve our maker, our omen for the future. And so all these people now are coming forth with a new philosophy that includes spirituality, and my favorite, Teilhard de Chardin.
Robert Muller was a member. Neil Donald Walsh, Hazel Henderson, Jean Houston, Thomas Berry, Barbara Marx Hubbard, Mikhail Gorbachev, and Jane Goodall. The Club of Budapest has a World Wisdom Council, in association with the World Commission of Global Consciousness and Spirituality. They say the awakening of global consciousness is a new and monumental event in human evolution. Jane Goodall is a member, so is she interested in the environment or Luciferian spirituality?
Now we have to learn to live truly on this earth, coming back to normalcy. But the normalcy is not the normal of the past century or century and a half. That was out of the norm. We have got to find a new norm. The new norm is the old norm, where life on earth can flourish.
Lucis Trust planned a World Shift conference together with Ervin Laszlo. Global cities are leading the world shift from reliance on fossil fuels. The urgent need to phase out fossil fuels was finally recognized at the United Nations. And it's led to this. So the real reason for Findhorn was an experiment in sustainability for the future design of our cities. Findhorn Fellow Marilyn Hamilton is an independent researcher of cities as human hives and Gaia's reflective organs. Jazz Coleman from the band Killing Joke writes on the Lucis Trust website, global society is radically rearranging itself via mass centralization for its own survival's sake. In 1999, a Lucis Trust article said, throughout the world, enlightened urban planners are focusing on the development of neighborhoods where residents have less need to travel long distances to work or to shop. The idea is to stop cities sprawling out into the surrounding countryside by transforming existing areas into high-density housing. In order to implement the 15-minute city, they needed the right cover story, so they were waiting for their crisis. The World Economic Forum said, with COVID-19 and its variants keeping everyone home, the 15-minute city went from a nice-to-have to a rallying cry. Meeting all of one's needs within a walking, biking or transit distance was suddenly a matter of life and death. The pandemic created an urgency around equitable urbanism that sidelined arguments about bike lanes and other amenities that have roiled communities for years. The term 15-minute city was coined by Professor Carlos Moreno. He was inspired by Jane Jacobs, who was funded by Rockefeller to produce a critical study of city planning and urban life in the US.
We're developing, through technology, an ability for consumers to measure their own carbon footprint. What does that mean? That's where are they traveling? How are they traveling? What are they eating? What are they consuming on the platform? So, individual carbon footprint tracker. Stay tuned. We don't have it operational yet, but this is something that we're working on.
An early scientific paper on the atmosphere, endangered and endangering, was written by William Kellogg and edited by Margaret Mead. William Kellogg was a member of Skull and Bones. Also listed on the paper is James Lovelock, the Gaia Man, as well as Stephen Schneider, who wrote, like most people, we'd like to see the world a better place, which in this context translates into our working to reduce the risk of potentially disastrous climatic change. To do that, we need to get some broad-based support to capture the public's imagination. That, of course, entails getting loads of media coverage. So we have to offer up scary scenarios, make simplified dramatic statements, and make little mention of any doubts we might have. Stephen Schneider edited a book called Scientists on Gaia. It contains a section written by James Lovelock and another by Paul Ehrlich, who wrote The Population Bomb. Trading Emissions, Full Global Potential was written by Simon Lynette, Executive Vice Chairman of Rothschild. He argues that a global authority will be required to regulate carbon trading schemes, and that national governments must necessarily cede some of their sovereignty to this body. That perhaps it might be regarded as having wider benefits than merely saving the planet. Perhaps it might be the basis for a new world order.
The tyranny we face is the threat of the extinction of the human race.
The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation are partners in the Sustainable Development Goals. According to Alice Bailey, the key to humanity's trouble has been to take and not give, to accept and not share, to grasp and not to distribute. Irresponsible exploitation of the Earth's resources is unsustainable and interferes with the divine circulatory flow. It is now the task of humanity to restore this flow, bringing balance between spirit and matter. The climate crisis reflects a spiritual crisis.
The culture of peace adds a dimension to the SDG goals of vision. Inherent in the culture of peace movement is a vision of a new world.
Well, I wrote a book in 1981 called The Politics of the Solar Age, and I had just come from 6 years at the U.S. Office of Technology Assessment, advising that government body about all of the technological choices that we had in our future. And it was clear to me that the mega choice we were all going to have to make was to shift from fossil-fueled early industrialism, which was already, 300 years old, to the technologies of what I call the solar age. And they are, of course, renewable energy technologies, maximum efficiency, recycling, and designing technologies to work with nature rather than destroying nature. So that's the shift, the great transition.
What we are living through is a time of great upheaval. Firstly, because we are witnessing, and not just since this summer, but over the past few years, the end of what we might have seen as abundance. And for those who enjoyed it, it is also the end of a carefree time. Our freedom, the liberty to which we have grown accustomed to in our lives, has a price, and sometimes when we have to defend it, we have to make certain sacrifices as we fight to defend it.
In Al Gore's book, Earth in the Balance, he quotes Teilhard de Chardin. The fate of mankind, as well as of religion, depends upon the emergence of a new faith in the future. Armed with such a faith, we might find it possible to re-sanctify the earth, identify it as God's creation, and accept our responsibility to protect and defend it. In 1987, David Rockefeller and Edmund de Rothschild attended the Fourth World Wilderness Congress. Out of this came the Earth Charter, which received funding from Rockefeller.
Who leads the environment movement? The convener of the summit, Maurice Strong, identifies Baron Edmund de Rothschild as the creator of the environment movement. Here are his own words describing Rothschild as the positive synthesis of environment on the one hand and growth and development on the other. Listen carefully as Maurice Strong introduces Baron de Rothschild.
So there is no better person. He epitomizes in his own life that positive synthesis between environment, conservation on the one hand, and economics on the other. And I'm just delighted to have this opportunity of introducing to you Edmund de Rothschild.
Maurice, thank you very much indeed for all that you've said, and I would ask the audience to take with a slight grain of salt all that he has said about me.
Rothschild is the positive synthesis of environment on the one hand, that's the thesis, and growth and development on the other, that's the antithesis. He very clearly admits that the Rothschild combination, including the Rockefellers and most world capitalists, aim to control the environment and development movement as the synthesis.
For Maurice Strong, there is no such thing as a visit to Moscow without dropping in on Mikhail Gorbachev.
What a wonderful portrait.
Once ruler of the Soviet Union, he now runs his foundation, and he's great pals with Maurice Strong. They met 10 years ago through their concern for the environment.
Well, I am older than you, I believe.
Now they are both sponsors of the Earth Charter, a document inspired by the UN Charter of Human Rights, which promotes a world of justice, peace, and sustainable development.
Maurice Strong was the first executive director of the United Nations Environment Programme. At the Earth Summit in 1992, he said, "The New World Order, Mr. President, must unite us all in a global partnership." Maurice Strong is reported to have said he would like to write a book about the leaders in Davos and the World Economic Forum. He said, "What if a small group of these world leaders were to conclude that the principal risk to the Earth comes from the actions of the rich countries, and if the world is to survive, those rich countries would have to sign an agreement, reducing their impact on the environment. Will they do it?" Strong resumes his story. The group's conclusion is no. The rich countries won't do it. They won't change. So in order to save the planet, the group decides, isn't the only hope for the planet that the industrialized civilizations collapse? Isn't it our responsibility to bring that about?
I think one of the best expressions of the new spirituality is first, we have talked about the eco-villages. This is a wonderful new expression of this spirituality. And another is the Earth Charter. And the Earth Charter, which began in Rio de Janeiro in 1992, traveled around the world with all of these different religious groups and civil society and NGOs, and came up with these 16 principles of human responsibilities. And this is the key to the maturation of the human family, is where we go beyond the individual, my rights. Of course, human rights are very important, but the larger view is, what are my responsibilities?
They've even put the Earth Charter document into a fake Ark of the Covenant called the Ark of Hope.
The world order wants to create a new society out of the ashes of chaos. A collectivist fourth world, complete with a collectivist religion, collectivist finance, and unchecked world national socialism. The world order will offer Gaia, Mother Earth, to the masses as the Big Brother image to worship in the fourth world. Maurice Strong has already set up a 140,000-acre project in Crestone, Colorado, to develop this Earth religion system. Projects are funded by the Rockefeller Fund, among other foundations. The Earth Summit will link environment with industry. The lords of the Unsaid Conference will be the masters of who gets what and when if we don't do something about it quickly.
So, all of this is so eminently doable. I mean, the shift but to plant-based foods and beverages, which is now double-digit growth all last year with all of the startup companies. And the group I've been working with, which is a consortium of investors who happen to be animal rights people and vegans and vegetarians from around the world, and they have 16 trillion of AUM, assets under management. They're the ones that are funding all of these new startup companies, oat milk and soy milk and whatever. And they're also shorting the 16 big meat producing companies because they say we can no longer afford to kill and factory raise animals.
So here's what I'm taking away from this, because I don't want to overtake your time. It's that in this moment of pandemic, we need to dream way bigger.
Way bigger. Yeah.
Way bigger. Of what is the biggest picture I can paint.
Yeah.
Of what's possible in the future. Yes, there's going to be suffering, and there's a lot of suffering. Yes, people are going to die. There's going to be a lot of that. But people die. That's sort of like a part of the design, So to have compassion in the short term for the suffering, but to be bold in your imagination.
The Georgia Guidestones say, maintain humanity under 500 million in perpetual balance with nature. Guide reproduction wisely, improving fitness and diversity. Alice Bailey said, let us never forget that it is the life, its purpose, and its directed intentional destiny that is of importance. And also that when a form proves inadequate, or too diseased, or too crippled for the expression of that purpose, it is from the point of view of the hierarchy, no disaster when that form has to go. Death is not a disaster to be feared. The work of the destroyer is not really cruel or undesirable. I say this to you, who am myself, upon the ray of love. Yeah, she's a real ray of sunshine. In 1972, the Club of Rome published The Limits to Growth. It says man can create a society in which he can live indefinitely on Earth if he imposes limits on himself and his production of material goods. The World Economic Forum provided a platform for the Club of Rome report, The Limits to Growth, which attracted a great deal of publicity for the 1973 meeting. The forum intensified its emphasis on environmental issues.
We cannot hide away from human population growth because, it underlies so many of the other problems. All these things we talk about wouldn't be a problem if there was the size of population that there was 500 years ago.
Jane Goodall is a patron of Population Matters. In 1991, the Club of Rome produced a report with a section entitled The Common Enemy of Humanity is Man. In searching for a new enemy to unite us, we came up with the idea that pollution, the threat of global warming, water shortages, famine and the like would fit the bill. All these dangers are caused by human intervention, and it is only through changed attitudes and behaviour that they can be overcome. The real enemy, then, is humanity itself. Robert Mueller wrote a letter to the UN Secretary-General Kofi Annan in 2005. He says, "You must absolutely convene another conference on population to avoid the considerable increase of 3 billion more humans in the poor countries. The US policy and refusal of such a conference must be disregarded." He also wrote, "I am surprised that no one has yet thought of creating a pro-Earth, humanity-challenging organisation which would put itself in the shoes of our Mother Earth and rejoice whenever humans diminish in numbers or consume less. The first prize should go to the United Nations, which through its World Population Conferences and anti-population work has prevented 2,200,000,000 more people from being born between 1952 and 2000. Maurice Strong's opening statement at the Earth Summit in 1992 was, "Population must be stabilised and rapidly. If we do not do it, nature will, and much more brutally."
What do you see as the biggest challenges in conservation?
The growing human population. Because if where we are, there's nothing else.
And do you have views about what should be done about that?
Can't you guess?
Rockefeller started the Population Council in 1955. The Rockefellers helped fund Planned Parenthood, as well as the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Bill Gates' father was a director of Planned Parenthood. In James Lovelock's book, Healing Gaia, he says humans on Earth behave in some ways like a pathogenic microorganism, or like the cells of a tumour or neoplasm. We have grown in numbers and in disturbance to Gaia, to the point where our presence is perceptibly disabling, like a disease.
And Paul Ehrlich, I don't know if he's around, but he's involved here, I think. I read The Population Bomb 30 years ago, and he feels like, because I talked to him, I had him out for a weekend 30 years ago when I was doing my research on population, and he thought that the world population ought to be between 2 and 2.5 billion people.
Paul Ehrlich wrote in The Population Bomb, "The birth rate must be brought into balance with the death rate, or mankind will breed itself into oblivion. We can no longer afford merely to treat the symptoms of cancer, of population growth. The cancer itself must be cut out. Population control is the only answer." In 1974, the Club of Rome published Mankind at the Turning Point, where they say the world has cancer, and the cancer is man.
What do we have to learn? I can put it in a few words. We have to learn to be coherent. Coherent within ourselves. If all our cells, all our organs are coherent with each other, we are healthy. That's the definition of cell, definition of health. If any part of our body is not coherent with the rest, it becomes a disease. If it just keeps pushing its own interest, reproducing, becomes a cancer.
Barbara Marx Hubbard says, "Christ states that those who see themselves as separate and not divine hinder humanity's ability to spiritually evolve. Those who deny their own divinity are like cancer cells in the body of God."
Human beings are a disease, a cancer of this planet. You are a plague, and we are the cure.
Barbara Marx Hubbard noted that natural systems evolve to a higher order following periods of exaggerated disorder and crisis.
If we took the next 5 years and said our purpose would be by 2020, we would connect enough of the co-creators in health, education, economics, in every sector of human endeavor, in every culture, and for the very first time get an actual picture of the emerging world that's already in our midst, which we have never seen before. We've never seen our world working at the scale that it's possible for it to work. What if we were to take a shared movement, just like our wonderful poet was saying? What if we had a movement to connect what's working and show up by 2020 as the beginning of the next stage of human self-evolution?
Rosicrucian Bulwer-Lytton wrote The Coming Race. Madame Blavatsky and Alice Bailey both believe the Aryan root race is an emerging new race, Alice Bailey wrote, "When the birthing process is over, a new humanity will be seen active upon the earth, a new race of men, new because differently oriented." In The Ages of Gaia, James Lovelock writes, "What if Mary is another name for Gaia? Then her capacity for virgin birth is no miracle." Lucis Trust. Remember, the light bearer is Lucifer.
This fusion of the light of the soul with the light of matter is the basis of redemption, the progressive raising of the whole of creation towards the divine. And when the thinking of the majority is conditioned by the loving inspiration of the soul, the lower worlds will become illumined by divine purpose, and humanity will enter its birthright as a planetary light bearer.
Jean Houston. Remember, the phoenix is an occult symbol for Lucifer.
And while our world is on fire and our earth is running her own parallel fever, this burning down of the old maps and archetypal structures of our society is taking place everywhere. And you see, this is precisely what provides the conditions for the emergence of new mythic stories. Just like the phoenix rising from her ashes, she needs the fire. She needs the fire for her rebirth.
So again, if with some compassion, if we can midwife and birth a sense of a future that's inclusive and that's not just consumptive, that's part of what religions can do.
Founded in 2001, Cosmos is the leading international journal for planetary citizens, committed to the birth and emergence of a new planetary culture and civilization. Edith Roosevelt reported on the Temple of Understanding in 1962. At the Waldorf Starlight Roof, I heard Mrs. Dickerman Hollister, president of the Temple of Understanding, address 500 UN delegates and socialites. In a voice choked with fervor, she said, "We are seeding an idea to create a global symbol of the world." Then she struck with a wand an egg held aloft by a child. Out popped a magic golden tree, with 6 branches on either side.
It doesn't matter if you love him or capital H-I-M. Just put your paws up, because you were born this way, baby.
The performance we did last night at the Grammys was, and what we've been doing with the egg and the rebirth, it's meant to signify an artistic statement of birthing a new race, and it's a race with no prejudice, a race within the race of humanity.
Yeah.
In 2012, Lucis Trust reported, the Sedona World Servers Group will host a gathering of the many leaders, methods and ways in which the new group of world servers is building a new planetary civilization. We will also tune in to the Birth 2012 and Beyond celebration and webcast of Barbara Marx Hubbard.
Since I'd asked the universe the question, what is our story comparable to the story of the birth of Christ? If we knew it, what would it be? And so I heard the words, I would say from a universal consciousness, our story is a birth of a co-creative universal humanity. Our crisis is the crisis of the birth of an emerging species.
She also wrote in her book, Evolutionary Synthesis, in evolutionary transhumanism, the universal human appears for the first time on this earth as a new norm. Jazz Coleman again, with his one-eyed album cover, writes, "I wanted to hymn the end of Homo sapiens sapiens and the beginning of a new augmented species, which will coincide with the confirmation that mankind has interacted with various extraterrestrial intelligences for eons. It is this widespread disclosure that will awaken the cosmic man, leading to a sixth root race and mankind's eventual apotheosis, man becoming God."
So I want to talk to you today about the future of our species and really the future of life. We are probably one of the last generations of Homo sapiens. Within a century or two, Earth will be dominated by entities that are more different from us than we are different from Neanderthals or from chimpanzees. Because in the coming generations, we will learn how to engineer bodies and brains and minds.
This is on the outside of the Cathedral Church of St. John the Divine, a symbol of the birth of a new race, with a goat underneath it. Teilhard de Chardin. The Lucis Trust website shows a keen interest in Teilhard de Chardin. He was a Jesuit priest who had a profound influence on the New Age movements and has been described as perhaps the man most responsible for the spiritualization of evolution in a global and cosmic context. And he was criticized as incorporating common notions of social Darwinism and scientific racism into his work, along with support for eugenics. He was a friend of eugenicist Julian Huxley, who wrote the introduction to his book, The Phenomenon of Man. His views were influenced by Henri Bergson, whose sister was married to the founder of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, which Aleister Crowley was a member of. Samuel Mathers, the founder of the Golden Dawn, was also a Freemason, a Rosicrucian, and taught Kabbalah at the Theosophical Society. In 1962, Pope John XXIII issued a warning. It is obvious that in philosophical and theological matters, the said works of Teilhard de Chardin are replete with ambiguities, or rather with serious errors, which offend Catholic doctrine. That is why the Reverend Fathers of the Holy Office urge all ordinaries, superiors and rectors to effectively protect, especially the minds of the young, against the dangers of the works of Teilhard de Chardin. Some eminent Catholic figures, including Pope Benedict XVI and Pope Francis, have made positive comments on some of his ideas since. Pope Francis' encyclical Laudato Si advocates nothing less than a cultural revolution. Other important citations come from Teilhard de Chardin. The Pope says to all men and women of good will, "And praise be to you, my Lord, through our sister, Mother Earth."
Rinnovo allora il mio appello. Prendiamoci cura della nostra madre terra.
During the wedding of Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, the bishop quoted Teilhard de Chardin in his sermon.
Yes, there is a significance, I think, in it in terms of how the Magna Carta was something which inspired a belief in the fundamental rights and liberties of people. And it seemed to me critical now that we understand, as a result of what we've done to nature for so long, that nature herself has her own rights, and we have a responsibility to try to remember that. I mean, I've always felt sacred aspects in all this, which the more we desacralize nature, the worse it gets. So that is why it seems to me the Terra Carta is of such importance, because I hope it enshrines that understanding of why we must work with nature in harmony again, as we always should be doing.
While Christmas is, of course, a Christian celebration, the power of light overcoming darkness is celebrated across the boundaries of faith and belief. So whatever faith you have, or whether you have none, it is in this life-giving light and with the true humility that lies in our service to others that I believe we can find hope for the future. Let us therefore celebrate it together and cherish it always. With all my heart, I wish each of you a Christmas of peace, happiness, and everlasting light.
So how will they get humanity to worship the New Age Antichrist. We'll look into that in the next video.